Emotions run high as Roman Reigns opens up about a heartbreaking family tragedy, while Paul Heyman finally breaks his silence on Seth Rollins' devastating injury. In this shocking and emotional WWE update, we dive into Roman Reigns' emotional reaction to the loss of a loved one to cancer, Paul Heyman's shocking update on Seth Rollins' torn ligament following Raw, and will be ruled out of SummerSlam. Roman Reigns' epic return to WWE just weeks before SummerSlam 2025. This is more than just wrestling. It's raw, real, and unforgettable. What do you do when the man the world calls invincible suddenly becomes human? When the face of power, the tribal chief, can no longer hold back the flood of grief tearing through his heart? And what happens when silence finally breaks, not with a whisper, but with a revelation so raw it shakes the very foundation of the WWE universe? This isn't just a comeback. It's not just a storyline. It's not just wrestling. It's life. Unfiltered, unscripted, and excruciatingly real, because just weeks before the grand spectacle of SummerSlam, Roman Reigns, the undisputed head of the table, fell to his knees in tears backstage, shattered by the loss of someone he loved more than words could explain. A private tragedy that no one saw coming, and at the same time, across the country, Paul Heyman, Roman's once silent advocate, was forced to confront the media, the fans, and the truth about another heartbreak: Seth Rollins' health. The WWE World Heavyweight Champion had been injured badly. A ligament fracture during last week's Raw. The dream match was in jeopardy. SummerSlam uncertain. The Empire cracking, but in the middle of all this darkness, something unexpected happened. Roman Reigns returned. Not as a champion. Not as a tribal leader. But as a man grieving, broken, and burning with a need for redemption. This is the story the cameras never showed, the moments the WWE Universe wasn't supposed to see until now. It began quietly. Not with pyros or entrance music. But with a phone call. One that Roman Reigns would replay in his mind over and over again in the days that followed. The kind of call that freezes time. That knocks the air out of your lungs. That rewrites the script of your life in a single breath. The voice on the other end didn't need to say much. She's gone. 3 words. And everything stopped. Those close to Roman knew something was wrong. Even before the news became public, his absence from WWE programming had shifted from a strategic hiatus to something far more personal. At first, fans speculated: was he injured? Negotiating a contract? Planning a shock return? But none of that came close to the truth. Behind closed doors, Roman Reigns was mourning the loss of someone deeply personal. A family member whose battle with cancer had been fought in silence. Dignified. Private. Out of the spotlight. Because not everything in Roman's life was meant for the ring. Sources backstage described the moment he got the call as soul-breaking. He dropped his phone. He walked out of the meeting room and collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Security cleared the area. No cameras. No staff. Just silence, and a man trying to hold back the tidal wave. This wasn't the tribal chief the world had come to fear. This was Joe, the husband. The father. The cousin. The human being. Roman didn't speak to anyone for 48 hours. Not even Paul Heyman, and that silence was deafening until it broke, because just as the wrestling world held its breath for Roman's next move, another bombshell dropped. Seth Rollins, his brother in battle, his rival in destiny, was injured. And not just a minor tweak. A devastating ligament fracture suffered during his main event match on Raw. A freak misstep. A mistimed counter. A twist of fate. And suddenly, SummerSlam was in danger of losing its biggest star. Paul Heyman, long known for his cryptic promos and strategic silence, was forced into the spotlight. He issued a rare statement, and this time, there were no riddles. No angles. No manipulation. Seth Rollins is hurt, Heyman said, his voice cracking in an uncharacteristic display of emotion. And the question is no longer whether he can defend his title, it's whether he'll ever walk into a WWE ring again the same way. The locker room fell quiet, the fans fell into chaos, and Roman Reigns? He watched it all from a quiet hospital chapel in Florida, his hood pulled low, hands trembling. The man who had once ruled WWE with an iron will was suddenly watching his world fall apart. The death in the family. The fallen brother, and a SummerSlam without direction. But something changed in that moment. The silence broke not just with pain, but with purpose. Roman stood up and made a phone call. That call wasn't to a WWE executive. It wasn't to creative. It wasn't even to Paul Heyman. It was to his children. He told them, "Daddy has to go back." And just like that, a comeback was born. Not out of ego. Not out of revenge. But out of heartbreak. 3 days later, the jet touched down in Pittsburgh. Private landing. Unannounced. Roman stepped off in silence, dressed in all black, eyes shielded behind dark sunglasses. But those who saw him said something was different. The arrogance was gone. The posture had changed. There was no entourage, no smirk, just a man with a mission. WWE officials were caught off guard. He walked into the performance center unannounced. Paul Heyman was in a meeting when the door swung open. And when he saw Roman standing there, he didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just stood up and hugged him. They held that hug for 47 seconds. No words. Just breath. Just loss. And then Roman whispered, "It's time." No pyrotechnics. No arena promos. No camera crews. Roman Reigns returned to WWE television in the most unorthodox way imaginable. During a backstage interview segment with Sami Zayn, meant to promote his next feud, there was a flicker in the background. A blur. A silhouette, then gasps. Roman stepped into frame, eyes locked not on the camera, but on Sami. No script. No lines. Just presence. The interviewer froze. Sami turned and the look in his eyes said everything. This wasn't the Roman Reigns of last year. This was a man who had nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for. Backstage, the scene was electric. Wrestlers stopped what they were doing. Phones came out. Whispered reactions echoed through the gorilla position. Triple H, seated behind the monitor, leaned forward. "He's back," someone whispered, but not everyone was happy because Roman's return wasn't just symbolic. It was strategic. With Seth Rollins sidelined and the main event picture in chaos, questions immediately began swirling. Would Roman take Seth's place? Would he step into the spotlight once again? Was this a return, or a takeover? Paul Heyman, sensing the tension, broke his silence again the following night. Sitting alone in the center of the ring, under a single spotlight, Heyman addressed the WWE Universe in what would become one of the most emotionally raw promos of his career. "I stand before you not as the wise man, but as a broken man," he began, "broken by the pain of watching two of the men I love most suffer in silence. One, who lost someone so dear, he nearly lost himself. And another, who fought through pain until it ripped him in two. Seth Rollins is not just a champion. He's a warrior. But even warriors fall." Heyman paused, voice catching, "And now, the question isn't who will main event SummerSlam. The question is who will survive it." The camera cut backstage to Roman, watching on a monitor, his fists clenched. The emotion was rising. The story was no longer about titles. It was about legacy. About grief. About the cost of silence. The cost of being strong for too long. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the bloodline, tensions began to stir, because the return of Roman Reigns meant something else. A reckoning. The tribal chief had not forgotten who stepped up in his absence, who betrayed his image, who claimed his throne, and now, with grief in his heart and fury in his blood, Roman Reigns wasn't just back for SummerSlam. He was back for war. The corridors of WWE were never silent. There was always noise, boots against concrete, radios crackling, producers yelling cues, wrestlers warming up, laughing, shouting, preparing for battle. But the moment Roman Reigns returned backstage, the energy shifted. The air turned dense. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned. Solo Sikoa, sitting in the Bloodline locker room, felt it first. The weight of something unspoken. Something ancient. A ripple in the atmosphere. The temperature dropped. And for the first time in weeks, Solo wasn't in control. He stood up, not out of respect, out of instinct. Because when Roman Reigns walks back into the kingdom he built, everyone takes notice. Even the ones who tried to steal his crown, but Roman didn't storm in with vengeance. Not yet. He didn't scream. He didn't demand. He entered quietly. Like a storm rolling in low and slow before the lightning strikes. And when Solo opened that locker room door and found himself face to face with the man he'd once called tribal chief, there was a moment of stillness that could have shattered glass. Roman's eyes locked onto his younger cousin. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He just stared, and Solo, for all his bravado and silent rage, looked away first. It was subtle. Just a glance down at the floor. A flicker. But for Roman, it said everything. This wasn't about titles, this wasn't about power. It was about betrayal, and betrayal never goes unpunished. But before Roman could speak, a familiar voice echoed through the hallway. Roman, we need to talk. It was Paul Heyman. His voice low, urgent, trembling with the weight of two crises crashing into one another. Roman turned, his face unreadable. Heyman approached slowly, holding his phone. On the screen, a hospital room. Sterile. Cold. A man in a brace, his leg propped up, his face half hidden in bandages and swelling. Seth Rollins, the man who once fought Roman in the deepest trenches of the Shield, the man who broke away, bled, betrayed, and reunited with Roman 1,000 times in the battlefield of pro wrestling, and now, broken. Vulnerable. Silent. Heyman lowered the phone. They're saying he might not be cleared in time. Not for SummerSlam. Not for the fall. Maybe, never. The silence hit like thunder. Roman didn't flinch. But the pain in his eyes spoke volumes. He and Seth were never best friends. They were brothers forged in fire, steel, and sweat. But in the heart of war, a brother is still a brother. Where is he? Roman asked. Paul didn't need to answer. That night, Roman Reigns got into a black SUV. No camera crews. No retinue. Just him and Heyman. They drove under moonlight, through winding city roads, toward the hospital where the future of WWE lay sedated in recovery. When Roman entered the hospital wing, the staff recognized him instantly. They stood back. Whispered. But no one approached. He stepped into room 241. And there he was, Seth freakin' Rollins, the man with the loudest entrance in wrestling history, now resting, breath shallow, bandages thick, the weight of his future pressed into the metal of a knee brace. Roman sat by his side. No words were spoken at first. The air buzzed with fluorescent hums and distant monitor beeps. Then Seth stirred. Slowly. He turned his head. One eye opened, groggy from medication. And he saw him. Roman. He tried to smile. Roman reached forward and rested a hand on Seth's shoulder. You still breathing, huh? He said quietly. Seth's laugh was hoarse. Painful. I've had worse, Seth croaked. Roman leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. I heard what the doctors said. Seth turned his head again. I'm not done, he said. Roman smiled faintly. You better not be. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was years of history passing between them. No animosity. No rivalry. Just the weight of their shared scars. Then Roman leaned in. I'm going to carry this now. Until you're back. I got this. Seth blinked. His face softened. You sure? Roman nodded slowly. I've never been more sure of anything. Back at WWE headquarters, Triple H was watching all of this unfold from a distance. Reports had started leaking. Fan accounts captured grainy shots of Roman at the hospital. Seth's condition was becoming public. And SummerSlam's card? Completely up in the air. It was then that a decision was made. Roman Reigns vs. Main event SummerSlam. No opponent listed. No announcement. Just a shadowed graphic of Roman's face, his eyes lit like fire. The tagline, when grief becomes war. The Chief returns. Online, the internet exploded. Who would face Roman? Would it be Solo Sikoa? Would Cody Rhodes step back in? Would CM Punk answer the call? Was this the return of the bloodline, or its funeral? And then, just as speculation hit its peak, WWE released one final promo before the next RAW.IT featured no voiceover, just Roman Reigns. Alone. Walking through a rain-soaked graveyard, he stopped before a headstone. No name. Just the words, "You were everything." He knelt. Placed a ring on the grave. A tribal necklace. A memory, and then he stood, faced the camera, rain running down his face, eyes burning, and in one line, Roman Reigns reignited the fire that had been lost for months. "I may have lost my family, but I haven't lost my purpose." Fade to black. Backstage, tensions reached a boiling point. Solo Sikoa called a closed-door meeting of the remaining bloodline. Tama Tonga. Hikuleo. Even Zilla Fatu, caught between loyalty and fear. Roman's return had shaken the order of things. And now, battle lines were being drawn. Word leaked that Roman would address the WWE Universe live, in person, on the next Raw. No script. No handlers. Just a mic and a message. The arena sold out in 90 minutes. Fans didn't want to watch wrestling, they came to witness a man rise from ashes, and when that moment came, when the lights dimmed, the crowd held its breath, and the familiar "Acknowledge Me" graphic hit the screen, there was a roar unlike anything WWE had heard in months. But Roman didn't raise his hand, he didn't look smug, he stepped into the ring with eyes swollen from grief, and when he lifted the mic, his first words were not for his fans, they were for the one he lost. "You taught me how to fight," Roman said, voice cracking. "And now I'm fighting for something more than gold." He turned toward the camera, to Solo, "To everyone who thought my silence was weakness, you should have finished the job." And with that, the war for SummerSlam was officially declared. The fallout from Roman Reigns' return wasn't just emotional. It was nuclear. The very fabric of WWE's power structure began to shift. Backstage meetings ran late into the night. Agents scrambled to rewrite promos. Security was doubled. Why? Because Roman wasn't coming back to rebuild the bloodline, he was coming to burn it down. The first fire ignited on SmackDown. It was supposed to be Solo Sikoa's night, the enforcer, the man who had seized the throne in Roman's absence, the new head of the table in everything but name. He walked into the arena flanked by Tama Tonga and Hikuleo, draped in gold and arrogance, ready to address the WWE Universe. Ready to proclaim his dominance. Ready to bury Roman Reigns in words before SummerSlam could bury him in reality. But as Solo stepped into the ring, mic in hand, the screen flickered, static black, then a heartbeat. A single, deep, thunderous heartbeat echoed through the arena speakers. The lights died, and when they returned, Roman Reigns was standing in the crowd. Hoodie up. No music. No pyro, just presence. And that was all it took. The crowd erupted. Solo's face changed. He wasn't afraid, yet. But he was rattled. Because Roman wasn't playing the game anymore. He wasn't showing up for the tribal council. He was walking through the fire with a funeral in his heart. Roman didn't take the ramp, he took the stairs. He walked through the crowd like a soldier returned from war, not to reclaim what was stolen, but to destroy what replaced him. When Roman reached the barricade, Paul Heyman was already there, not in the ring, not with Solo. He stood near the timekeeper's table, staring at Roman like a ghost from his past had just risen. Roman leaned close, whispered something into Paul's ear, and Heyman's eyes went wide because he knew this wasn't a negotiation. This was a final warning. Roman climbed into the ring. No music. No mic, just Roman, Solo, and the tension of 10 years coiled around their necks like a noose. Tama Tonga stepped forward. Roman didn't flinch. Hikuleo stepped forward. Roman still didn't move. Then Solo raised his hand, and the others stepped back. The cousins stared at each other. Blood by birth. Enemies by choice. Solo spoke first. "You think grief makes you strong?" Roman didn't answer. Solo stepped closer. "You think showing up late makes you the chief again?" Still nothing, and then Solo smiled. A cold, twisted smile. "You should have stayed gone, yes." That was the spark. Roman exploded. The Superman punch landed so hard it shook the ropes. Tama Tonga lunged, but Roman ducked and drove him into the corner with a flurry of fists. Hikuleo tried to tackle him, only to be met with a thunderous spear that split the ring in half, and then, it was just Solo again. Face to face with the man he thought he'd buried, but Solo didn't run. He smirked and rolled out of the ring, because Solo wasn't here to fight. Not yet. He had something else. Insurance. As Roman stood tall, breathing heavy, battered but unbroken, the Tron lit up. A security camera feed backstage. Zilla Fatu handcuffed. Surrounded by Solo's security detail. Roman's expression didn't change, but his jaw clenched, and then Solo spoke over the microphone from the stage. "You're not the only one who lost something, Roman. Keep pushing, and you'll lose everything." The lights cut. SmackDown ended in chaos, but the message was clear: SummerSlam wouldn't be a match. It would be a reckoning. The next week, Roman made it personal. WWE cameras followed him as he entered the training center in Tampa, not as a wrestler but as a father. Zilla Fatu, released by Solo's guards, was waiting there. Conflicted. Bruised. Not from battle, but from choices. Roman didn't yell. He didn't demand. He sat down next to Zilla on the bench. "Do you know who you are?" Roman asked. Zilla looked at the floor. "I'm a Fatu." Roman nodded. "Your blood. But that's not what makes you family." Zilla turned. "Then what does?" Roman's voice dropped low. "Loyalty. Truth. Standing up when the world wants you to kneel." Silence. Then Zilla stood. "I'll be there at SummerSlam." Roman didn't smile. He just nodded once. "Then be ready. Because Solo won't come alone." And he didn't, because on the final Raw before SummerSlam, WWE shocked the world with a moment no one expected. The final entrant, the final player in this Game of Thrones, Jacob Fatu. No music. No promo. He walked down the ramp as the entire arena watched in disbelief. He entered the ring, stood beside Solo, and raised his hand. The arena shook, because now, the Bloodline Civil War wasn't just real. It was a war between titans: Roman Reigns, Zilla Fatu, the old guard. The ones betrayed: Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, the new blood. The ones hungry for legacy. And in the middle, SummerSlam, the biggest battlefield in wrestling history. Point 1 Ring. Point 4 Warriors. Point 1 Family torn apart, and only one will be left standing. The night was hot. The arena, electric, not just because it was SummerSlam, but because the world knew something sacred was about to break. This wasn't a match. This was a funeral for what used to be the Bloodline, and the rebirth of something far more dangerous. The stadium lights dimmed, commentators fell silent. And then, the opening notes of Roman Reigns' theme began to echo. But this wasn't the entrance fans remembered. Gone were the golden gloves. Gone was the arrogant swagger. Roman walked to the ring in all black. No pyro. No smirk. No "acknowledge me." Only grief. Only fury. Behind him, a step slower but just as focused, Zilla Fatu. A quiet storm. His eyes burning with the pain of betrayal. He didn't come to entertain. He came to stand beside his blood. And then, the lights died again. A red glow. A low beat. Solo Sikoa emerged, flanked by Jacob Fatu. They weren't there to fight for titles. They came to erase Roman's legacy and crown a new era. Point 4 Men. Point 1 Ring. Point 1 Family, now at war with itself. The bell rang, but no one moved. It was Roman who stepped forward first. He walked directly to Solo. Their eyes locked. "You think you're me," Roman whispered. "But you're just the shadow." Solo responded with a cold right hook, and the war began. It was chaos. Fists flew, bodies slammed. Zilla launched Jacob over the ropes. Solo drove Roman into the steel steps. The crowd roared with every hit, but behind every blow was pain. Behind every counter was a decade of loyalty turned to ashes. Paul Heyman stood near the ramp, watching, hands trembling. He wasn't aligned with either side anymore. He looked like a man watching his sons destroy each other, and knowing he was partly to blame. Inside the ring, Roman and Solo traded blows like gods. Roman hit a Superman punch. Solo didn't fall. He grinned and fired back with a Samoan spike so vicious it dropped Roman to his knees. Zilla leapt from the top rope to save him, but Jacob caught him midair with a brutal headbutt. The crowd was on its feet. The energy? Uncontainable. This wasn't about chance or finishes. It was about heartbreak. Roman crawled to the corner, blood dripping from his mouth. He looked at Paul Heyman, who stood frozen at the bottom of the ramp, eyes wide, caught between history and consequence. Roman mouthed, "You did this." Paul looked down, and the camera cut to black and white slow motion as Solo charged with another Samoan spike, only for Roman to counter with a desperation spear that folded Solo in half. The arena exploded. Zilla took down Jacob with a super kick, then a wild moonsault, and now Roman and Solo lay in the center of the ring, side by side, face to face, barely breathing. Paul Heyman climbed the steps, tears in his eyes, mic in hand, his voice cracked. "I never meant for this to happen." Roman turned his head, looked him dead in the eye. "You chose him." Heyman nodded slowly. "Because I thought you were done." Roman struggled to his knees. "I was grieving. You replaced me." And Heyman whispered back, "I thought you died with her." The crowd went silent. Zilla dragged Solo to his feet. Roman stood, and for a second, it looked like Roman would forgive. He stepped towards Solo. He reached out his hand. Solo blinked, uncertain, heart racing, but then, Jacob Fatu charged with a chair. Roman saw it, reacted, and took the hit right to the spine. He dropped. The arena screamed. Jacob was about to swing again, but Zilla Fatu speared him into the turnbuckle so violently, it broke the pad clean off. Solo looked down at Roman, looked at the chair, looked at Heyman, and hesitated. He dropped the chair, then turned and walked away. The bell never rang. There was no official winner, only broken bodies, broken bonds, and Paul Heyman standing alone in the center of the ring, looking down at Roman Reigns, the man he once called tribal chief, who now lay in agony not from the match, but from everything that led to this moment. As medics rushed the ring, the cameras caught one final shot. Roman, being helped to his feet, looked out at the crowd, then up at the sky, and whispered, "This was never about gold, it was about family." Fade to black. The morning after SummerSlam wasn't victory. It was silence. No post-match celebrations. No press conferences. No champagne, just bruised bodies, and a kingdom in ruins. Roman Reigns didn't fly home. He was carried into a private ambulance, his ribs fractured, his spirit shattered. Zilla Fatu rode with him, hand clutching his cousins, jaw clenched to keep from crying. And Paul Heyman, he didn't ride with them. He stood in the parking lot, watching the lights fade into the distance, knowing he had just witnessed the final breath of the version of the bloodline he helped create. But the chaos wasn't over, because while Roman lay sedated under hospital lights, Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu were already at war backstage. It started in the locker room. Jacob threw a table. "You had him, Solo. And you let him up." Solo didn't raise his voice. He never did. He just turned slowly and said, "I spared him." Jacob stepped forward, chest heaving. "You spared him? After what he did to us? You think he would have spared you?" Solo's jaw tightened. "He's still family." Jacob scoffed. "Family died when he left." And in that moment, the future cracked again. Jacob Fatu wasn't going to be anyone's lieutenant. He wasn't the next enforcer. He was a predator, and Solo was standing in his way. 3 days passed. Roman Reigns remained hospitalized. No tweets. No interviews. Zilla stood vigil at his bedside. The tribal chief had returned. And now he was being kept alive by painkillers and silence. Doctors reported internal bleeding, hairline fractures in 2 ribs, a possible concussion, and emotional trauma that ran deeper than any chart could explain. But what shook the WWE locker room wasn't the injuries. It was the look in Roman's eyes when he woke up, empty, hollow, like a king who'd lost everything he built. When the nurse asked if he wanted to turn on the TV, Roman whispered, no, because he already knew what he'd see. The headlines weren't about his return, they were about his fall. Tribal chief crumbles at SummerSlam. Jacob Fatu seizes the spotlight. Has the bloodline passed to a new generation? But perhaps the most devastating headline came from within WWE itself. A leaked internal memo from Triple H's office stating that